Hello everyone and welcome back to another live by Prime Mixer. My name is Janal Safti and today's session might sound funny on the surface, but behind the scene it's surprisingly powerful. So, before we get started, I want to ask you a question. How much is the price of a Big Mac in your country? Drop the prices in the comments. I know it sounds funny and you might be asking what does the price of a burger has to do with forex and currencies? Well, in today's session, you will know that it's more than you expect. But before we do the big reveal, let me define two key terms for you: an undervalued currency and an overvalued currency. Let's start with the undervalued currency. This currency is weaker than it should be, meaning that you need to pay more money to buy the same product. On the other hand, the overvalued currency is stronger than it should be, meaning you feel like you pay less money to get the same product. So I'll give you an example. If your currency is overvalued like the Swiss franc, and it feels like your money goes further, and one burger in Swiss franc will feel less or cheaper compared to the US dollar holder. It feels like you're getting a deal or a bargain. On the other hand, if your currency is undervalued, like for example, the Japanese yen, you feel like you need to pay more money to get the same burger. So it feels like a little bit more expensive. So to sum it up, an undervalued currency is a weak currency. An overvalued currency is a strong currency. So now it's time for the big reveal. The Big Mac Index. Yes, that is a real index. It's not a joke, I promise you. The Big Mac Index, that was an index created by the Economist in 1986. Why they created this? Because they wanted a simple way to explain the PPP. What is the PPP? The PPP is the purchasing power parity. So the idea is, on the long run, the same product should cost the same amount in countries. So to validate this idea, instead of creating a long list of basket products, they decided to pick the Big Mac. Why the Big Mac? Because at this time it was sold in over 100 countries and it's pretty much the same everywhere. And finally, the price of a burger doesn't just reflect the burger price, it reflects also labor, wages, rents, taxes, ingredients, and those things. So the burger became an economic. Let me tell you, or let's look at it from another way. Ask yourself this: how many hours in a day you need to work in order to buy one Big Mac? I'll tell you what. In the US, the price of a Big Mac is $6. And also, based on the most recent statistics, the US, an hourly rate or the hourly wage is between $24 to $31 per hour. This is how much you get paid if you work 1 hour in the US. So if you calculate it, that means you get 4 to 5 Big Macs from 1 hour's work only. That sounds impressive, right? Okay. On the other hand, in some countries, maybe you need to work the full day or even more than 1 day just to afford one Big Mac. So, this is a real insight on the real world purchasing power. It's about how much people can actually afford. I'll give you another example. Since I'm from Egypt, so let's take the price of burgers in Egypt as an example. In Egypt, the price of a Big Mac costs 125 Egyptian pounds. Let me remind you, the price in the US is only $6. So grab your calculators and let's do some math. If we try to calculate the implied price behind this Big Mac prices, you will see that the implied market rate is $1 is equivalent to 20 Egyptian pounds. But let me break it to you. That's not even close to the reality. The price, the real market price or the real exchange rate is $1 is approximately equivalent to 49 Egyptian pounds or almost 50 pounds. That means it's much weaker. Or in other words, the Egyptian pound is undervalued by 58%. And that's why it feels like the Big Mac is cheaper compared to the US. But if we calculate the real exchange rate, the price of a Big Mac will in Egypt will be around 295 or $296. That's a lot, right? Sorry. So now that we understand this idea, this index sounds powerful and fun, but it was criticized for one main big reason. So, in developing countries, the wages are less. So, naturally, the price of a burger will also be cheaper. And that's why the economists they did not stand still. They did the first adjustment in 2011. They introduced the JDP adjusted index. So, what does JDP stand for? It means gross domestic product. That means the total value of everything a country produces 1 year. Why is that important? Because by looking at the GDP per person, you can get a better idea about the incomes. And that was not the only adjustment. The second adjustment came in July 2022. Okay. Before that year, the Economist did one thing. They took the average price of a Big Mac in the US of four major cities: New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and Atlanta. Why? That sounds weird, right? How come the price of a Big Mac in the same country is different? Because in the same country there are different costs of living in different cities. So they took the average. So for example, in New York or San Francisco, the cost of living were higher, while in Chicago or Atlanta it was cheaper. So starting from July 2022, they took the official no longer using the average. Okay, I want to ask you this. How do you think this can help us as traders? That's a good question. So, this can give us a fair value check. It can help us understand the market sentiment, meaning that if the gap between the market rate and the PPP or the GDP adjusted index is big, that can signal market pressure, speculation, or government influenced policies. Also, especially for hedge funds and multinational investors, it can give them more insights. How? Strategic insights. They can plan long-term investments based on this currency trends and understanding the difference of the value. So that means this is not a daily trading signal. It's a way to understand the long-term trends. Okay, now that we understand how great that Big Mac index is, I have to tell you that just like any other index, this one has limitations. What are these limitations? Not and also, like we mentioned before, there are different costs of living. So the price of a burger can be less. That means it can be cheaper taxes or less rent or labor or all those things, not necessarily an undervalued currency. And finally, just like we mentioned before, it can be cheaper because in developing country the wages are less. So that's why the GDP adjusted index is very, very important to keep in mind. So to sum it up, it's a very powerful and fun index, but it's not a precise trading model. Think of it as a way to connect the everyday life, like buying a burger, to global currencies. So it's fun, visual, and it highlights the long-term trends. So traders, before we end today's session, let's recap what we've learned today. The Big Mac Index help us understand the difference between the undervalued versus the overvalued currencies. It was introduced by the Economist to help us understand the PPP, purchasing power parity. And when we look at the work hours and income differences, we can understand the real world purchasing power. And finally, you can use it for long term insights and planning investments. But it's not a daily trading signal, and you always have attention to its limitations. I hope you enjoyed today's Burger Economics, and I also hope that you join us for the next live by Prime Mixer, where we will share trading lessons just with you. So, until then, keep learning, keep trading, and maybe treat yourself with a Big Mac just to celebrate today's session. See you soon.